Greetings viewers, if you clicked on the video link, you are here to learn how to disassemble and or completely break down your Gen 5 Glock pistol. You'll know it's a Gen 5 pistol because typically next to the model number up here, it will say Gen 5. It's very similar in the grip with the little square checkered stippling portion here and the giant magazine release. However, there will be the absence of any sort of finger grooves. The front of the pistol grip will be completely flat. Also, you'll notice that there is only one pin in the front here, whereas for the previous models, there were 2 pins here, so there have been a few minor changes on the inside. First thing that I am going to do is break down this pistol just for simple maintenance and cleaning. After that, I'm going to break down the slide and the frame into its individual parts. So if you're here because you're doing something beyond basic maintenance, you're swapping parts out, or just want to do a thorough cleaning, you can check the timestamp down below and that'll help you find the section that you are looking for in specific. So in order to disassemble a Glock pistol, we do have to pull the trigger first. So the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to safety check this thing. I do not have any live ammunition anywhere in the room with me. There are no magazines available. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to physically and visually inspect my magazine well, and there is no magazine in here, no device that's going to feed ammo into this pistol once I pull the slide back. I'm going to lock the slide to the rear. I'm going to visually and physically inspect my chamber with my pinky, making sure there is no way that a round has somehow lodged itself in there and is unable to be extracted. I'm going to then look down my mag well and make sure that I can see the white t-shirt there, and there is nothing here that is going to possibly put ammunition into this weapon and make it unsafe. Typically what I will do to make this process the easiest is I will rotate from a shooting grip so that my index finger falls over the top of the slide. You can use other fingers if you'd like, just beware that you don't pinch yourself in the between the barrel where the ejection port is. So I'm going to use my thumb and index finger to slightly pull the slide back. If you pull too far, it will reset the trigger. So I'm going to put this in a safe direction and pull the trigger. I will then wrap my finger up and pull that slide back ever so slightly. There is a takedown lever at the front here on either side. You need to pull down both sides. So I'm going to use my opposite index finger and thumb for that. I'm going to pull those all the way down as far as they will go, which will then allow my slide to simply come off the front of the pistol. For our slide here, we have our recoil spring assembly. We need to push forward a little bit and then rotate that out. Gen 4 and Gen 5 recoil springs are dual captured, so you have this larger section here with the smaller one that goes down inside of it. We can set this aside. Our barrel will just lift up the back here, push forward, and rotate that until it comes out. So this is all you need to do for any sort of basic maintenance or cleaning. You have access to get to all the components that you need to clean your pistol. So if you are here for any further breakdown of this pistol for whatever reason, I'm going to go ahead and get these pieces out of the way, and we're going to start with the frame. So again, there are only 2 pins on here. They did change the slide lock on here to be ambidextrous, so that's going to be a little bit different if you have had a previous generation of pistol that you were familiar with taking apart. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my punch tool. You don't have to have the official Glock licensed product. You can use any small punch that will fit the diameter of the holes on the pistol here. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to push until that pops out on the opposite side. Same thing again on this one. This back pin is plastic, so be careful. If it's not going, you may need to finagle a little bit and reevaluate to make sure that it's not caught. If there's some sort of back strap on here, sometimes it may be caught on that and you may need to push the opposite direction. But I'm just going to come in here, push till that pin pops out. Next thing I'm going to do, we've got this metal section right here. I'm going to get underneath that and just lift straight up until it pops out. We can grab our slide stop here. It all comes out as one assembly. There is a little spring that is attached to the front of it. That's going to stay with it. We can then grab the ejector portion of our trigger group and lift it straight out of the pistol. So those are all of the pieces we have so far. If you are here to replace the magazine release on your pistol or switch it because you are a lefty and you want to have a left-handed magazine release, this is the portion you're going to be looking for. I will tell you from personal experience, if you are planning to swap this magazine release out with a metal one, I would highly recommend against doing so. Take it from me from personal experience. I thought I was being high speed. Back in the day, I bought a titanium one, and the problem is metal and plastic parts, so your magazine has notches on it, or it should have notches, especially if you're switching it to a lefty. I'll cover that in a second. But those metal parts versus plastic parts, metal is always going to win. These little ledges right here are what your magazine release uses to contain the magazine in the pistol. And over time, especially if you're shooting a lot, you're using the same magazines over and over, that metal parts rubbing against plastic is going to eat away at these edges, and eventually over time you may be in the middle of shooting and your magazine starts popping out because it does not have enough surface area here to grip to keep the magazine in your pistol, because again, that metal won over time and rub the plastic away and it doesn't have anything to grab onto. So I again do not recommend swapping to a metal mag release. Now if you are switching to a lefty, make sure you are not using any old magazines. And you'll know they're old because they will only have one notch on the side of the magazine. It should have one on either side. If you swap to lefty and you're using a mag and it will not stay inserted and you're having issues, check your magazine and make sure that's not the issue. So rant over on that, let's go ahead and cover what we need to do to get the magazine release removed and or swapped to the opposite side. This is a little bit difficult to explain and demonstrate on camera, so I'm going to do the best that I can. You can see down inside the mag well here, we've got this metal rod that's coming up. It's curved off to the side and dropped down inside what is our mag release button. What we need to do is we need to grab a hold of that with our long flat screwdriver, and we are going to pop that up and out of the channel that it's in, and then we're going to grab it with needle nose pliers and pull it straight up and out of the pistol. So again, I can't really do that and explain while doing it, so once I have the pieces out, I will show you in a little bit better detail what's happening. But I need to get in here. I'm going to put my thumb up against the mag release to keep it from moving. I'm going to hook that little metal rod and force it over to the side and up and out. So now looking at it, you can see that it's no longer down in that little channel. So I'm going to go ahead and grab it with my needle nose pliers and just pull it straight up and out. So that's going to just pull straight out. We can set that aside. And then our magazine release button is just going to pull out from the opposite side of whichever end it's in. All right, so to give a little bit more explanation of what's happening, looking down inside of our mag well, that metal rod slides straight down in here. There's a little hole that it fits in. It's going to go into this channel and it comes straight up. While it's sticking straight up, our magazine release is sitting like this. We have to bend or push this to its side while the bottom is secured. It's like that. We have to push this over until it falls down into that groove, and then it's going to kind of pull back. And this is that spring tension. So this is actually pushing against it. And when we are operating our magazine release, that's where our spring tension's coming from. So what we did to remove it is I had to hook underneath this metal thing, or this metal rod, pull it over and up out of this groove so that it popped back like this. And we were able to pull it up and out of the weapon. So if you swap your magazine release to a left-handed position, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to be sitting here, but we're going to just push it to the opposite side. You're going to push it over, it's going to drop down in this groove, and then pull back this direction. So that's everything for the frame. These are all the pieces that you should have. Next, we're going to move on to our trigger assembly and taking that apart a little bit further. So what you should have is this whole assembly looks just like this. This is going to be a little bit different than the previous generation of pistols, but it's still quite similar. All we're going to do is we're going to grab our trigger bar here, we're going to grab this, and we're just going to rotate, and this whole thing should pop out. So this front tab here just goes underneath this little metal hook when it comes time to rotate into and out of position. Our trigger connector here is still the same. We're going to put a flat screwdriver in between the metal and plastic part here and just rotate it a little bit to get that to slide up until a point where we can grab a hold of it. And then we're just going to pull it apart. You can see it's pretty deep, so it goes down quite a bit into this plastic. If you were doing this because you're polishing your trigger, this part right here is where you're going to want to polish on this piece. You don't need to worry about the rest of it unless you're just trying to make it all match because you're a perfectionist. Otherwise, all you'll need to do is work on this. Same thing for this portion here. You can work on just this area and then just the top portion of this right here where it engages with the safety inside of the slide. Chances are if you bought a whole new trigger that this may just be parts that are getting replaced altogether, so you'll have these, you'll just swap them in for your new parts and then reassemble them as indicated. All right, so that's gonna be it for disassembling the frame portion of your Glock. So we are gonna go ahead and put this all back together now. Typically what I will start with is I will take my trigger connector, I will insert it into its slot just like so. For the Gen 5, you can now take this and push it all the way in place because we can just rotate this in. We don't have to worry about hooking it on any springs or anything. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take it just like so. We're gonna point, again, that end down so that it goes into that metal hook. This needs to go into this hole there in the plastic, and we need to have this go in between here. So all we're gonna do is insert it like that. And it should look like this once you have it completely rotated in place. And so that's all one assembly and we're good to go. Before we reassemble any portion of this, we need to put the magazine release back. So make sure that if you're putting it lefty or righty, that you put it together the right way so you don't get your whole pistol back together and realize you did it wrong. So once you insert this into the pistol, make sure that as you acquire your shooting grip that it is where your thumb is on your shooting hand, and that's where you want your magazine release to be before you move on to the next step. I'll use my thumb to hold this in place. I will take this metal rod. It doesn't matter which end is what. It's the same all the way across. I will grab one end with my needle nose pliers and I'm going to insert it again down into that channel where it goes. Once I get it into the hole, I'm going to push on the top until it will not go any further. So you can see we are back in place there. It is resting against the top of the magazine release. I need to shift it over to the side and get it to drop down into that notch that I showed you. So again, we slid it over, it dropped down into the notch. Just to give it a little bit of a test, we're gonna push our magazine release. We have that spring tension that we need. We did do it properly. All right, so the next step we're gonna do to put this back together is we're gonna take our whole trigger assembly and we are gonna drop it down in like so. Make sure everything fits right back into place. So once our trigger is back in, the next thing we need to do is install our slide stop. That's just gonna drop in over the top. The hole that's on here is going to correspond with that hole to help you line things up. It only goes in one direction, so insert it like so. This metal piece is going to go just like this, right over the top of it. That same hole is going to orient with that hole in the front of the receiver. It's going to go in just like this, and it's going to press all the way down. We're then going to take our thicker metal pin, and that's just going to go right in here. I'll use the back portion of my punch tool to press it. Again, if it's not going, do not force it. You may need to wiggle some of these parts around, but it should just press all the way in. I'll give it a little bit more, and then what I'll do is I'll check and make sure it's even on both sides. Now, before I insert this back pin, again, which is plastic, so be very careful inserting and removing this pin. Not only losing it because it's a small part, but again, because it's plastic. If you are intending to install any sort of backstrap, beaver tail accessory on your pistol, this is the portion where you would do that while this pin is out. So if that's the only thing you're doing, you would just remove that pin only. Generally, you can just push down if there is a beaver tail on here to give you something to grip onto. Take a flat metal screwdriver. Remember, we're going metal against plastic. Metal's always going to win, so be very careful and do not force anything. While pushing down, I'm going to insert this into just the small little crack that's there, and I'm going to kind of wiggle it and twist until that pops loose. This will then pull and rock off the back. If you are intending to remove it and you don't want anything on there, you can just go ahead and put your pin back in and you are fine. If you were replacing this with some sort of other piece or aftermarket accessory that goes back here, you would hook the bottom on first, rotate it up into place, push it. If you have a beaver tail, it should snap or clip and attach on there. Make sure it's nice and flush. I can look through the hole and see all the way through that it's even. I'll lay it back down on the table, taking my plastic pin, inserting it into the hole. Use the flat end of my punch tool and just push down. There may be a little bit of resistance. If it is not going, do not force it. I have broken these pins before, and thankfully I had spares. If you don't, you're gonna have to find some. Push it all the way till it goes in. I'm gonna double check, make sure it's even on both sides, which it is. So we're good on that. So the reassembly of our frame is complete, and we can move on to the slide. All right, so now we are gonna disassemble the slide of our Gen 5 pistol. This is very similar to previous generations in terms of the initial disassembly. We're gonna pull this portion of the striker all the way to the rear. There is a little piece of black plastic. So from here going towards the front of the pistol, this right here, we need to push against. So we have to put our punch down here on this end of it and push down this way. All the while, this is gonna need to slide off. This is the little back plate that people get, cosmetic ones that they replace with a Punisher skull or some newfangled switch that goes on there. But there are parts underneath here that are under spring tension. We do not want those going flying and getting lost or hitting you in the eyeball. So we're gonna do this the way that I have found is the easiest for me. So typically what I'll do is I will take the muzzle end of the slide and put it against my table. I will grab it with my hand and put my thumb over this plate in a position where I can not only keep everything covered, but also apply downward pressure, because that's gonna need to slide off as part of the disassembly. All the while using my punch again in here and pushing down on that little black piece of plastic. So, got my grip, got my punch up against there, got my thumb on this, getting ready to apply pressure, sliding it off. So I'm gonna push down, slide my plate off. It's off, so I'm gonna release with my punch. The little plate came out, so we can set this aside. Everything is released of its spring tension, so I can safely remove my thumb and nothing's gonna go flying. Now I can grab underneath the striker here and just lift this straight out. So that whole assembly will be removed. There is another rod here that has a spring attached to it. We can slide this out now. Make sure all those come out in one piece. We still need to get this out. That does have a spring underneath it. So I'll put my finger over that, wiggle my extractor around a little bit until it comes out. That is allowed this to pop up. We can then dump it out. And you'll see it's this metal piece here, and it's got a spring attached to it, so make sure both of those come out as well and don't lose them. At this point, our slide is completely disassembled. There are no more small pieces in there. You can drop this in an ultrasonic cleaner. You can access the striker channel with a Q-tip, get down in there and get a thorough full cleaning of every single portion of this that you need to, get all the gunk out of there, and then we'll move on to reassembling our slide. All right, so these are all the pieces that you should have for reassembly on your Gen 5 slide. So we are gonna go ahead and start putting it back together. The first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my extractor. The portion that's got this little round metal nubby end is gonna go towards the rear, and it's gonna go in the side here. Once I've inserted it, I'll keep a finger over it to keep it from sliding out. We then have our little metal piece here that's got our spring attached to it. Again, make sure those pieces are all together. So if you notice, there's a flat side and a rounded side. The flat side is gonna go towards the outside or towards the extractor. So we're gonna spin it this way, making sure our spring is still attached. We're gonna drop it down in this hole. If you attempt to put this in the wrong way, it will not go. It only goes in one way, so it's kind of foolproof there. Keeping a little bit of back pressure on the extractor so it doesn't flop out. I'm gonna push down on this. It's gonna push the extractor out a little bit. As we continue to press, it's gonna let it pop back in. And now, by putting pressure against the extractor there, it's gonna keep this from moving. So while maintaining that, I'm just gonna rotate my slide up so that we're back on the muzzle end again. We're gonna take this rod here that's got the spring attached to it, should have a little black plastic cup on it. There is a small channel off to the side of the large hole that's gonna drop in with the metal plunger piece first. It's gonna drop in, and then we can push it, and it's not gonna go all the way down, and that's fine. Remember, it was under spring tension when we removed that plate. Next thing we're gonna do is take our striker assembly. We're gonna drop it down in there as well. You may have to finagle it a little bit to get it to go. That's gonna push down, and then it's gonna stop as well without going all the way flush. Now, I'm gonna let go of my extractor. I'm gonna kind of get a better grip up here. This is where you would replace this plate. I'm gonna go ahead and insert it into this channel here where it's just getting started, but it is bumping into that extractor housing, so I am gonna need to put a finger behind it to apply upward pressure. Now, while applying that pressure, I need to push this striker assembly, this plastic piece, down to get out of our way. So you'll notice that that jumped right up there until I bumped into this. So now I can move on to pushing this down, continue pressing up on the plate. Until it snaps all the way in. That should be flush all the way up against the top. And our slide is now reassembled. So we are now ready to fully put our pistol back together. So we're gonna put the slide on top of, rotate it so it's resting on the sights. We're gonna take our barrel, we're gonna insert it obviously towards the front of the pistol. We're gonna slide it into the hole at kind of an angle and drop it down. We push back and it should fall into place by itself. We're then gonna take our recoil spring assembly. The little nubby end here is gonna go forward. It's not gonna drop in all by itself, so we're gonna have to grab the flat end and push forward while pushing down to get it to lock into place. So we're gonna push forward and down. It's gonna lock into place. It should stay all by itself, locked in that notch in the barrel. If we move it, wiggle it around, it's not gonna fall out. So we can then take our frame, put our slide on it, make sure we line up these two metal rails here. Slide it straight back, keep going all the way, making sure we go over the back rails, all the way, lock the slide to the rear, and our pistol is now reassembled. May seem kind of stupid, but I am gonna safety check it one more time before I give it a little function check. So I'm gonna visually and physically inspect my magazine well, make sure there's no magazine, no ammunition in there. Visually and physically inspect my chamber, make sure there's no ammunition. Looking straight down my mag well, I can see white t-shirt. There is nothing there. There is no way ammo is getting into this gun unless I say so. It shouldn't fly off. If it does, or you have any spare parts, you may want to go back and restart over on the video. So we're going to do a little function check. So I am going to pull the trigger, back the slide. And there you have it. Our Gen 5 Glock pistol has been reassembled. So hopefully you found this video useful in your endeavors in disassembling and reassembling your Glock Gen 5 pistol. If there's something that I did not make clear, you still had questions about, or you've got some spare parts, you can ask me in the comments down below and I'll be glad to assist you the best that I can. So with that, thanks for watching and we'll catch you in the next video.